Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me. In my series Freemasonry and Satanism book review, series number 281, this is part 2. So I did part 1 on this book, the Phoenix Journal 139, that I read entirely. You can see I highlight this stuff. A plethora of information about WTH. What the heck is going on? Do you want to know? Watch my videos. So in part 1 of series 281, I mentioned there was another Phoenix Journal 162 that is an entire book, 107 pages I believe, about the involvement of the elites to depopulate the planet. The involvement of the elites, the people who control our planet, that control our politicians, that control the churches now, that control the banking system, that controls the military, that controls the Center for Disease, that controls the hospitals, that controls the economy. Everything, their focus, their urgent problem is what they consider overpopulation. It's in this book. So anyways, where do you find the Phoenix Journal? So let me just give you a brief synopsis if you haven't seen my videos. You can look up the Phoenix Journals on the internet, and hopefully you can find this website. And you can see on the left there, you got the Phoenix Liberator newspaper, the Contact newspaper, the Phoenix Journals, Express Archive. So from 1990 to focus, I get a different camera. 1990 to 1999, they were publishing these newspapers called the Liberator for 2 years. Then they had some political dissent in the organization and went to something called the Contact newspaper. And from those articles, they were creating these books, as you can imagine, from a newspaper published every week. For 10 years, there would be a lot of articles in that newspaper, and a lot of those articles were cataloged and put into these journals. And so there's about 120, 130 of published journals. See if I can show you a picture what that looks like. So they have these journals that are published. So you can look this up. And over here, if you can see here, they got banned journals, and they got unpublished journals, and then they got journals. So if you go find the website for the Phoenix Journals, it says 4winds10.com on the top here. You'll find all of these journals and the newspapers completely free, PDF, downloaded to your computer. And they're anywhere from 120 to 200 pages. You can slay the dragon, rape of the Constitution, rape, pillage, and ravage. Number 14, skeletons in the closet. So 120 of these things. You can find them on used book sites. I've got a bunch of them here. I think I have about 20 of these that I find. They're kind of difficult to find, but you can go on used book sites and look up the Phoenix Journal. So I'd like to collect the entire 120. But some of these books are going for $800, $900, $1,000 or more. But you can go to the 4winds10.com and other Phoenix Journal websites and download these PDF books for free, and get yourself one of those printers that's tank cartridgeless. It has a tank, like the Epson printer, and it takes the 502 bottle of ink instead of cartridges, so it's rather cheap. So for $300 you can buy the printer with these bottles of ink and print out 4,000 pages. And these are only 200 pages, so do the math. $300, you can print out a lot of these books. And then, of course, on the published journals, they also had the banned journals, or the unpublished journals. Unpublished, which is the ones I've been reading and reviewing and making videos on. So it's quite a big, thick book here, just on my indexing of what's available on the 4winds10.com Phoenix Journal websites. Pictures of all the published journals, Liberator magazines, Contact newspapers, unpublished journals, etc., and comments by other people. So it's not like I have anything to do with these people, but I think it's a valuable resource to try to find out what's going on. If you certainly haven't done any research at all, getting organized here, you can find it. So I wanted to talk about this journal, unpublished or banned. There's 125 of the unpublished ones and 120 of the published ones. If you look hard enough, you can find the books, used book sites, Abe Books, Cheap Books, Alibis Books, Amazon, etc. So we got the coronavirus going on. A lot of people out there making videos. Like my shirt needs to be. Kind of a tight shirt on the hot patio here. Hot summer day, seems like. It is April 5th, 2020, so it's not quite summer, but it certainly is a scorcher here in the mountains of North Carolina. So I've been reading these books and making videos, and I want to talk about the coronavirus and the entire world shutdown, and listening to Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org, or Deborah Traveris, or Bill Deagle, or David Wilcock, and many others, Josh Del Sol, and some other videos I'm watching. And the astrologers, not that I'm into astrology seriously. I do try to research everything so I can kind of get a fair and balanced attitude. But my significant other, she watches a lot of astrology videos. So sometimes I'm in the room and I pay attention, and it's kind of a game for me to listen to some of what they talk about, and learning about the different constellations, Aquarius and Taurus and Capricorn, and the sun is in Aquarius, and Saturn is moving into Aquarius, and Pluto and Saturn are conjunct. And see, you learn, and apparently what they're saying, to make the story short, is there's an alignment of things taking place that happened 100 years ago, just prior to World War I. So they say there's something to these alignments in different parts of the sky that mean different things. For example, the 12 astrological signs is a 25,000 year period. Each sign, if you're in the age of Pisces or the age of Aquarius, is 2,210, 220. There's a lot of debate on the exact number, but let's just use 2001, for example, years for the age of Pisces. And of course, Jesus was born at the beginning of the age of Pisces, and the age of Pisces is ending. And the symbol for Jesus is the fish, and the symbol for Pisces is the fish. And so we're entering, if you've ever heard the song, Age of Aquarius, we're entering the age of Aquarius. Okay, so apparently, when you leave one age, one constellation, and you move into another one, there's a transition, and it can be quite catastrophic. Earth changes, pole shift, all kinds of crazy things, crazy weather. So when you change from one sign to the other, and apparently that period of time can be anywhere from 80, 60 to 100, 120 years to get through from Pisces to Aquarius. The transition period, let's just say it's 100 years, can be quite tumultuous. So we're entering the age of Aquarius, and apparently we started leaving Pisces, entering into the age of Aquarius around 1950. So 70 years ago. So apparently we have 30 more years to go to get completely immersed into the age of Aquarius. And of course, we already know we've had World War I, World War II, 9/11, and the climate change, global cooling, earthquakes, and all these tumultuous, catastrophic situations occurring, and making the rest of us on planet Earth wonder what the heck is going on. So apparently, when you leave one sign and go into another sign, these tumultuous things happen. And apparently, the astrological signs are divided like that for a reason, a cycle between when the solar system and the Earth goes up to the top of the ecliptic plane, and then goes down and crosses the elliptic plane, and then goes to the bottom at the furthermost point of the ecliptic plane. And there goes my brightness again. Well, that's not helping. So we're entering the age of Aquarius. A new age, so they tell us. A whole book dedicated to depopulation. Let me read a little bit, quote from Aldous Huxley, famous character about 100 years ago, and see if you can understand why what's happening in the world is happening. So he says, let us now ask ourselves what the practical alternatives are as we confront this problem of population growth. One alternative is to do nothing in particular about it and just let things go as they are. But the consequences of that course are quite clear. The problem will be solved by nature in the way that nature always solves problems of overpopulation. When any animal population tends to starve, to suffer from severe episodial diseases, in the human population, we can envision that the natural check on the unlimited growth of population will be precisely this. There will be pestilence, famine, and since we are human beings and not animals, there will be organized warfare, which will bring the numbers down to what the earth can carry. What nature teaches us is that it is extraordinarily dangerous to upset any of its fundamental balances. And we are in the process of upsetting a fundamental balance in the most alarming and drastic manner. The question is, are we going to restore the balance in the natural way, which is a brutal and entirely anti-human way, or are we going to restore it in some intelligent, rational, and human way? If we leave matters as they are, nature will certainly solve the problem in her way and not in ours. So 100 years ago, they were worried about overpopulation. Now, I think, personally, it's all a deception. I do not believe there is an overpopulation problem. For one reason, after World War II, let's say we had 100 million people in America. Well, it was a very prosperous period for the United States, a lot of immigration, etc. And we call it the baby boomer period because in 20 years, the population went from 100 million to 300 million. And in the 1960s, it was an alarming issue. I've gone over a couple books on that. The Limits to Growth and the Population Bomb by these elites and secret society folks. So they brought up the idea of changing the moral philosophy of America with the hippie age, bringing us marijuana and heroin and other drugs and the rock and roll era. In Europe, they called it festivals. So they wanted to change the moral paradigm in America because the families were producing a lot of children after World War II. So that would be 45, 55, 65, 20 years abouts. So apparently it worked with the hippie age and all of that. The couples stopped having children altogether, many of them, or 1 or 2 children, not 6, 8, and 10. So my point is, if you do the math from that period of time, 1945 to 65, and you assume those people grow up to be 60 and 70 years old, that's today. So 100 million to 200 million, maybe 150 million Americans today are elderly and are going to die anyways, and the population is going to plummet, which is why they've been bringing in immigrants from Mexico and Central South America, from India, from all over the Middle East, the Arab countries, and the world. They were trying to replenish our population. It seems to me the real issue is an economic issue, and it's mentioned in this book here in many places, that they don't want the elderly to grow old and die gracefully. They would like to nip it in the bud and be done with that financial burden. These older people have become useless food eaters in the eyes of the satanic elite who control our planet. And I know that's a lot of harsh things to say, but I've been reading the books. So if you wonder what the purpose is of the things going on right now, and even the FCC, Federal Communications leader, was on YouTube and TV saying 5G is going to be installed. It's a race against China and the rest of the world, and there won't be any testing, and it's really urgent. Well, meantime, They're doing the same thing in China and Australia and countries all over the world. And apparently it's part of artificial intelligence and technological warfare. Apparently this 5G and other microwave transmissions, whether it's from laser beams, satellites, HARP transmitters, it's a weaponized type of system that can cause flu-like symptoms. Get it? And apparently they're obsessed with the overpopulation, so they say, which I think is a deception. But let me continue reading this book, and you know where to get these unpublished Phoenix journals. You know where to get the published ones at the 4winds10.com and other Phoenix Journal websites. PDF free, download it to your computer. Go buy an Epson Envy computer that uses these things, and you can print out 4,000 pages. So you can print out these books rather cheaply. And I'm sure other printers, I don't have anything to do with the printer companies, but I just am amazed at how much I'm able to do for almost pennies. So free PDF, all the Phoenix Liberator newspapers, the Phoenix Project Contact newspapers for a 10-year period, the published journals, the unpublished journals, and all of this insane information that it appears to be, for the most part, true. Okay, so back to this thing with Aldous Huxley. The third alternative is to try to increase production as much as possible, and at the same time to try to reestablish the balance between the birth rate and the death rate by means less gruesome than those which are used in nature, by intelligent and humane methods. So they want to resolve or solve this overpopulation problem. And remember, this stuff was written, and he said these things 100 years ago. And they have been killing people on planet Earth for the past 100 years and developing a lot of biological weapons, experimenting with the influenza, even the COVID virus, the one we're talking about, COVID-19. It's just because it popped up in 2019. But everybody probably will test positive. If you've ever had the flu, you had a version of a COVID virus. You can see the deception everywhere. And the transmissions of all their microwave signals apparently disrupts your cells, causing toxins to be released, causing flu-like symptoms. And they are obsessed with overpopulation. And I've made book reviews on that. The Limits to Growth and the Population Bomb by the Club of Rome and Mr. and Mrs. Meadows and Mr. Ehrlich, and it's just too much evidence. Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, sustainability, global warming. We've heard all of this stuff. So they want to control population. They want to resolve this issue. They want to kill off a good portion of the population. In this connection, it is interesting to note that the idea of limiting the growth of populations is by no means new. This is 100 years ago. In a great many primitive societies, and even in many of the highly civilized societies of antiquity, where local overpopulation was a menace, although less fearful than the natural means. So I'm aware 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,500 years ago, if the elites, the princes and the dukes and kings, if they felt there were too many people in the kingdom, they would just stir up a war with the next kingdom, who might have too many people at that time. Too many for them. They don't actually want the responsibility for taking care of the people, for the lands that they have acquired, probably through wars and all of that. So instead of taking care of the people, they just want to live their opulent well-fed lives, and when there winds up being a significant population, they just start a war and they have the citizens kill off each other. A common method of population control throughout history. The common was infanticide, killing or exposing by leaving out on the mountain unwanted children, or children of the wrong sex, children who happened to be born with some slight deficiency or other. Abortion was also very common. There were many societies in which strict religious injunctions imposed long periods of sexual continence between the birth of each child. But in the 19th and 20th centuries, various methods of birth control, less fearful in nature, have been devised, and in fact theoretically conceivable that such methods might be applied throughout the whole world. So again, I don't think there's ever been a population problem. I believe that there's been a problem with the elites who had their personal kingdoms or estates, that they didn't want to be concerned with the people, the workers, the farmers, and the other people. If they became a nuisance, they would just rather see them exterminated. What is theoretically possible, however, is often practically almost impossible. There are colossal difficulties in the way of implementing any large-scale policy of limitation of population, whereas death control is extremely easy under modern circumstances. Whereas death control is extremely easy under modern circumstances. Birth control is extremely difficult. So death control is easy with the advanced technologies we have today. The reason is very simple. Death control, the control, for example, by infectious disease. I can't make this up. Down there by my fingers. Can be accomplished by a handful of experts and quite a small labor force of unskilled persons, and requires a very small capital expenditure. Aldous Huxley, nice guy, huh? There's a ton of these people who have been saying these things in the past 100, 200 years. Again, Huxley, the problem of control of the birth rate is infinitely complex. It is not merely a problem of medicine and chemistry, biochemistry, physiology. It is also a problem of sociology, psychology. Next page. Theology and in education. It has to be attacked on about 10 different fronts simultaneously if there is to be any hope of solving it. And continuing later in Huxley's speech, merely from a technical and temporal point of view, we are obviously in a very tight spot. But we have also to consider the political point of view. There would undoubtedly have to be either worldwide agreement or regional agreements on the general population policy in order to have any satisfactory control of the situation at all. But there is absolutely no prospect at the present time of our getting any such political agreement. Aldous Huxley, 100 years ago. Huxley continues, now we have to ask ourselves what our attitude should be towards these problems. We come to the other end of the bridge. We pass from the world of facts to the world of values. What we think about all this depends entirely on what we regard as the end and purpose of human life. What we think about all this depends entirely on what we regard as the end and purpose of human life. If we believe the end and purpose of human life is to foster power politics and nationalism, then we should probably need a great deal of cannon fodder, although even this proposition becomes rather dubious in the light of nuclear warfare. So because we have nuclear weapons now, they're assuming we won't have nuclear war because it'll just kill everybody. So they can cannon fodder to solve the population problem. People dying in wars like World War I and World War II, where the Christian Germans on one side were firing their machine guns at the Christian British and Americans on the other side because the elites deceived us. The Germans and the Americans and the French and the Brits and all the other people, the Italians who were dying, most of them all Christians, ironically enough, all those soldiers dying on both sides, it's called cannon fodder. So one way they were controlling the population for the past 1,000 years, and before that, whenever they didn't want the people, was have wars or barbarians ravaging through the area, just slaughtering everybody, like Genghis Khan and the other peoples throughout history. But if, as I think most of us would agree, the end of human life is to realize individual potentialities to the limits and in the best way possible, and to create a society which makes possible such a realization and philosophical way about the population problem. We see that in very many cases, the effort to raise human quality is being thwarted by the mere increase in human quantity, that quality is very often incompatible with quantity. So if they have fewer people on the planet, the ones that are left will have a higher quality of life if the quantity, the numbers of humans, can be reduced. But I beg to differ with that particular philosophical point too, because it would just be more slaves for the elite to manage. The elite will never do their own work. They always need slaves. But when you have 5 or 6 billion people, the elites are worried they won't be able to control the slaves, the farmers, the industrial workers, and of course people like me and you watching this video. We like to strive to have a family, buy a house, have a car, have a job. And they don't want all the people all over this planet behind me to have all those luxuries, because that will use too many of their resources. So they believe. We have seen that mere quantity makes the educational potentialities of the world unreasonable. So there's so many people, they can't educate everybody. But then again, you don't want to have too many educated people, because then there's too many bosses and no slaves. So they think. We have seen that the pressure of enormous numbers upon resource makes it almost impossible to improve the material standards of life, which, after all, have to raise to a minimum if any of the higher possibilities are to be realized. Although it is quite true that man cannot live by bread alone, still less can he live without bread. And if we simply cannot provide adequate bread, we cannot provide anything else. Only when he has bread, only when his belly is full, is there some hope of something else emerging from the human situation. And again, I disagree with this philosophy. Another good reason, since World War II, technologies have advanced to the 99th degree, to a tangent curve. Here we were for 1,000 years, and even getting iron and railroad trains, and really nothing for 2,000 years. And all of a sudden, 100 years ago, TV, radio, aircraft, satellites, and now everybody runs around with a handheld phone that's a much more sophisticated computer than people they used to have in laboratories 50 years ago. So with all those advanced technologies and this huge planet behind me, from north of the this line here and over here in Europe, all that stuff was all frozen tundra, and you had all these jungle areas in Africa. There was so much resources available and so much advanced technologies, and the money that they have sucked out of our economies could have everybody on the planet living like a king if they weren't building all these advanced weapons and fake wars and cold wars and trying to take over the planet and mind control. It's just trillions upon trillions upon trillions have been looted from us. And if that money were allocated to computerized control of farming, and the air would be cleaner and the food would be healthier, this planet has plenty of room for everybody. More than half of it is totally unused. But so I think it's a huge deception. Not only that, but when you talk about Aldous Huxley and the other people mentioned in this book, generally speaking, they're all from the secret societies and other satanic elite cults. So it's much more about the biblical prophecy than it is about the overpopulation. Back to the story here in this book. Then there is the political problem. It is quite clear that as a population presses more and more heavily upon the resources, the economic situation tends to become more and more precarious, as there is a tendency in the precarious situations for centralized government to assume more and more control, and there is therefore now a tendency towards totalitarian forms of government, which certainly we in the West find very undesirable. So 100 years ago, the United States was doing quite well, but somebody wanted to destroy the United States, bring it down from a first world power, and turn it into a second-class nation or a third world power. And they moved a lot of the jobs, industrial manufacturing, over here to China and India at a very interesting time after World War II, when the Zionists finally got control of Palestine, and they were exporting Jewish people from the United States and Argentina, the whole world, and over here in Europe, all down here into the Middle East. And a lot of those Jewish people had a lot of serious financial holdings, even investments in the manufacturing in the United States. So when they moved here from all over the world, when they created the State of Israel, Jews were leaving everywhere. It's called Aliyah. And planes and trains and pictures. They took their financial holdings. There were organizations, Zionist organizations, to do this. And they wanted their manufacturing to be in communist China and other nations. They were making more money, and they pretty much had slave labor, which was causing a lot of financial distress in Canada, United States, Mexico, and other places, and Europe especially. So there was a behind-the-scenes movement to move all of those manufacturing resources. And they didn't like in the United States, where they had labor laws and wage laws and health benefits, where, of course, in communist China, you didn't have those issues. So you find yourself in the position we are today. And now that they've got this coronavirus, and President Donald Trump as the president, causing a lot of harsh economic disturbances in China and India and other nations all over the world right now, it does seem like a lot of people are saying we're on the razor's edge of a World War III and retaliation or some kind of revenge or some kind of economic war for survival, that there very well could be a nuclear war. But of course, maybe the other alternative is to use the 5G artificial intelligence technologies to take people out with biological weapons. Just it's all crazy. I agree. But let me get back to this story. But when you ask whether democracy is possible in a population where 2/3 of the people are living on a 2,000 calories a day and 1/3 is living on over 3,000, the answer is no, because the people living on less than 2,000 calories will simply not have enough energy to participate in the political life of the country, so they will be governed by the well-fed and energetic. Again, quantity mitigates against quality. And finally, isn't it nice that these people think like this? Not. And later, finally, the unlimited increase in human numbers practically guarantees that our planetary resources will be destroyed, and that within 100 or 200 years, an immensely hypertrophied human species will have become a kind of a cancer on this planet and will ruin the quasi-organism on which it lives. It is the most depressing forecast possibility. 100 years ago, Aldous Huxley, one of the secret society elite members, Freemasons, Illuminati, the people who control our world, Zionists, banksters, and many different groups, all of them seemingly involved into the occult and Satanism. So you can't believe anything they say, no matter how rational it seems. It's a deception. And they don't mention anything about spiritual beings, we people. They don't mention anything about God. And I think God can solve anything. So let me continue on with this. I think one can say from this last point that the problem of quality and quantity is really a religious problem. For, after all, what is religion but a preoccupation with the destiny of the individual and with the destiny of society and the race at large? This is summed up very clearly in the gospel when we are told that the kingdom of God is within us, but at the same time it is our business to contribute to the founding of the next page, kingdom of God upon earth. We cannot neglect either of these two aspects of human destiny. For if we neglect the general qualitative population aspect of destiny, we condemn ourselves and certainly our children and grandchildren as individuals. We condemn them to a life with which we should find intolerable, and which presumably they will find intolerable too. There are certainly theological objections to population limitations. Most religious organizations in the world today, both within and outside the Christian pale, accept it. But the Roman Catholic Church does not accept any method of population control except that which was proclamated and made permissible in 1932, the so-called rhythm method. Unfortunately, where the rhythm method has been tried on a considerable scale in an undeveloped country such as India, it has not been found to be very effective. The fact that the church recognizes this problem was brought home very clearly in 1954 at the time of the first United Nations Overpopulation Congress, 1954, for the first United Nations Population Congress, which took place in Rome when the late Pope, in an allocution to the delegates, I guess a speech to the delegates, made it quite clear that the problem of population was a very grave one, which he recommended to the consideration of the faithful. And later, we can conclude then by saying that overpopulation is quite clearly one of the gravest problems which confronts us. And the choice before us is either to let the problem be solved by nature in the most horrifying possible way, or else to find some intelligent and humane way of solving it, simultaneously increasing production and balancing the birth rate and the death rate, and in some way or other forming an agreed international policy on the subject. To my mind, the most important prerequisites to such a solution are, first of all, an awareness of the problem, and then the realization that it is a profoundly religious problem, a problem of human destiny. Our hope, as always, is to be realistically idealistic. Aldous Huxley, 100 years ago. You can see their concern. And they've had a lot more going on since then, with sustainability and Agenda 21, depopulating the Middle East. There's an alternate reason why they want to do this. Then a lot of it's anti-Christian, anti-Islamic, anti-Buddhist, anti-Hindu. Remember, India, China, all these countries, and many others were overrun by revolutionaries and became communist countries when they moved all of the manufacturing from the United States and all over Europe. They moved it to the communist countries, and the elites who controlled all of those manufacturing and production businesses, industries, largely many of them were Jewish people, and had to move all of their money and wealth and holdings, according to the Zionist Congress and books I've gone over, to move all of that power, wealth, and control to Israel. Again, fulfilling a biblical prophecy and clearly anti-Christian, pro-Satanist cult religious philosophies. Here's a letter to the UN Secretary General U Thant. This is by Lyndon B. Johnson, President. So Lyndon B. Johnson, President, became President because President John Kennedy was assassinated. So he was an insider, in my opinion. But here's what he says. Dear Mr. Secretary General, Lyndon B. Johnson, 1965. The United States government recognizes the singular importance of the meeting of the Second United Nations World Population Conference and pledges its full support to your great undertaking. As I said to the United Nations in San Francisco, we must now begin to face forthrightly the multiplying problems of our multiplying populations. So our president, who took over after President John Kennedy was assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson, in 1965, wanted to solve the multiplying population problem. Our government assures your conference on our wholehearted support to the United Nations and its agencies in their effort to achieve a better world through bringing into balance the world's resources and the world's population. So since 1965, what's that, 75, 85, 95, 2000, 35 years, and this is 2020, add 20 years, 55 years. Countries all over the planet, the leaders have been toppled and puppets put in place, and they're this close to their global world order, And one of the final straws is to get rid of most of the people, as the Georgia Guidestones indicate in Georgia, Florida, that they want a worldwide population of 500 million. They're coming close to their Luciferic satanic world order. They just need to kill off a few billion people. I wonder if they could have considered all of these things we're seeing going on today. And the answer is yes, according to Max Egan and Dane Wigington and Deborah Travers and Bill Deagle and many other videos I've been watching. But back to President Lyndon Johnson's letter to the United Nations in 1965. In extending my best wishes for the success of your conference, it is my favorite hope that your great assemblage of population experts will contribute significantly to the knowledge necessary to solve this transcendent problem, second only to the search for peace. It is humanity's greatest challenge. This week, the meeting in Belgrade carries with it the hopes of mankind. You think they're serious? Let's find another one here, moving forward on this book. Okay, so this is Euthant. This would be the Secretary General of the United Nations. Let me read what he says. And you can see I highlight this stuff. I read it already. Just saying, and you consider the whole world is in shutdown right now. And as anybody probably knows, small businesses account for, do you know this? Small businesses account for about 90% of the employment of the world. Self-employed people, like myself, and that we employ a lot of people. I don't care if it's a hair salon, a gymnasium, a retail store, restaurant, small pub. 90% of the employment comes from small businesses, small business enterprises. 10% or less is the huge corporations. And we know that that number is growing, shrinking for the small businesses and growing with the corporations, with the consolidation of office supply stores and construction, lumber supply businesses and huge mart type businesses and all that. So they do want the small businesses to go away, individual sovereign power, ability to buy a home and have some wealth and travel and think for yourself. And they probably need to disarm us too. So this particular situation with the worldwide shutdown is going to do more harm economically than any influenza flu virus could ever do. And there are people, I've been watching videos, who are experts who are saying that the economic fallout from this will far exceed the people who would have died from the flu. Can you imagine with these businesses that never open again, restaurants, bars, hair salons, gymnasiums, people with no money? And there was even something in the news on one of the comment sections on Yahoo press release where landlords are giving eviction notices to tenants because they can't pay the rent because they're not working. And they're saying how horrible the landlords are, but the landlords are saying, wait a minute, a lot of landlords are managers. They don't own the apartment complex, whatever. And those managers are running it for their boss. And their boss has leveraged that apartment complex to the 100%. So all of the rent has to come in to pay for the manager, maybe a little profit for the owner, but most of it goes towards the mortgage. So if the tenants don't pay their rent, the manager can't pay the mortgage, and of course he'll be fired by the building owners, usually a large corporation. And in the newspaper it said some of these managers or corporations tried to talk to the banks, and the banks weren't being flexible at all. So it is a dead-end road. It is a, you could say, you don't have to be a prophet to predict what's going to happen next. The economic fallout all over the world, down here in Australia. I was reading, get my finger right here, in Australia. All over the world, if people will, and they're talking about grocery stores and food will start running out. Can you see that the flu virus thing will be small in comparison to the fallout of the economic worldwide destruction? And not only that, with the advanced technologies like the 5G microwave transmissions, which apparently bombards the cells in our bodies, just like putting a hot dog or a glass of water in a microwave oven, causing the cells in our bodies to emit toxins in our bodies because they're being bombarded with the microwaves. And those toxins cause flu-like symptoms. They know this. There's a lot of people making videos, experts and professionals discussing this. And we know that they want to depopulate the planet. I got a big, thick book of much more material. I can only do so much in a 1-hour video. But let's see what Euthant of the United Nations says. I do not wish to seem overly dramatic, but I can only conclude that from the information that is available to me, excuse me, I get dry mouth here, as Secretary General, that the members of the United Nations have perhaps 10 years. This is 1969. Let's round it off to 1970. So they have 10 years, that'll be 1980, left in which to subordinate their ancient quarrels and launch a global partnership to curb the arms race, to improve the human environment, to defuse the population explosion, and to supply the required momentum to developmental efforts. If such a global partnership is not forged within the next decade, then I very much fear that the problems I have mentioned will have reached such staggering proportions that they will be beyond our capacity to control. Euthant, 1969. So do you see what the problem is? And it's a complex problem, because on one hand, we're entering the age of Aquarius. The elite are fulfilling biblical prophecy. They're trying to destroy religion across the board, Christians included. This is biblical prophecy. It's the Satanist people who are in charge, who have taken us through the last 70 years of an insane technological war going on, with even CIA and other secret services involved in delivering drugs to American citizens and citizens all over the world. All this is common knowledge. And then we have all this satanic abuse, sex with children, and murder, satanic ritual murders, and so much more. And then they say that they're concerned about overpopulation. In my opinion, what they're really concerned is, they're being exposed, and the best way they can continue to control the planet is with less people, and of course using their advanced technologies. All right, let me read a little bit more and end this video. United Nations World Population Conference, 1974. The World Population Conference, having due regard, for human aspirations, for a better quality of life, and for rapid social economic development, taking into consideration the interrelationship between population situations, social economic development, decides on the following World Population Plan of Action as a policy instrument within the broader context of the internationally adopted strategies for national and international progress. So the deadline, according to the Secretary General for the United Nations, was 1980. Phoenix Journals were putting out these Liberator newspapers for 2 years, in 1990, 91. And then they switched the name to Contact Newspapers, 92, 93, 94, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right up to 2000. 10 years newspapers with all these writers from all over the planet, people who were writing a lot of conspiracy books on all the stuff going on behind the scenes to bring about the global world order. So during the entire 90s, they were publishing these thousands of documents that you can get free online, phoenixjournal.com or fourwinds10.com, whichever they are when you look up Phoenix Journals. So for 10 years prior to the year 2000, tons of this material and tons of books and videos. People have been screaming at the top of their lungs, trying to warn the people. Population goals and policies. All right, a couple more minutes. Recommendations for action. Population growth. According to the United Nations, medium population projections, little change is expected to occur in average rates of population growth, either in the developed or in the developing regions by 1985. According to the United Nations very low variant projections, it is estimated that as a result of social and economic development and population policies as reported by countries in the second United Nations inquiry on population and development, population growth rates in the developing countries as a whole may decline from the present level of 2.4% per annum to 2% by 1985 and below 0.7% per annum in the developed countries. In this case, the worldwide rate of population growth would decline from 2 to about 1.7%. So apparently, is it possible that population worldwide was actually declining? Recognizing that per capita use of world resources, here it is, recognizing that per capita use of world resources, that's how much gas I use in America versus how much gas somebody might be using in Africa or in Brazil. So apparently per capita, we U.S. citizens are using more more of the high quality wine and foods than maybe people in Africa and South America, etc., Central America, third world nations. So they are considering the per capita use of world resources is a much higher in the developed than in the developing countries. The developed countries are urged to adopt appropriate policies in population, consumption, and investment, bearing in mind the need for a fundamental improvement on international equity. So I could read on here, and I have been reading this. There's so much more I need to say, but this is only one video. You can go get this 162 unpublished Phoenix Journal, 107 pages. You can read it online if you don't want to print it out. You can send it to your friends and family. 107 pages of all kinds of evidence that the elites are overly concerned with population, saying we're going to use up all the resources on the planet. And I think that's a totally false narrative. I think they have an ulterior motive. They need to depopulate it. They don't need 6 billion people around for the small amount of the elite people. They do need 300, 400, 500 million to do the farming and other slave type work for them. And they need to control the people who survive with the advanced technology, bringing us some kind of a Hunger Games movie type of reality. So use your God-given brain and ask yourself, why would the entire world be locked down? Why would all these business owners be sent home not to come conduct business so they can't pay their rent? They can't pay their bills. The banks are not going to be flexible. The vendors are not going to be flexible. A good portion of the world's business owners are elderly. The young people will never get enough financial resources to be able to take over those businesses or compete with the huge corporations. It looks like somebody has pulled the plug on the world's economy. It's like you pull the plug in your bathtub and all the water goes right down the drain. So all of the world as we know it a month ago, with everybody going to work and going home and going out to the baseball game, football game, music concerts, whatever, it seems like it might all be coming to an end. But not to fear. We are spiritual beings in these biological bodies. We're probably all here for a reason to experience this situation of leaving the age of Pisces, of leaving the previous 12 signs of astrology, the 25,000-year cycle, beginning the new 25,000-year cycle, where planet Earth will certainly be populated by humans. And apparently humans get reincarnated. So it doesn't matter what happens to us. It matters how we react to what happens to us. The more stressful the situation, the more dismal it may seem, the more bleak it may seem, you have to have more faith in God that everything is working out as planned. Maybe it's a big divide to let the people on the planet show their true colors, whether they deserve to go to heaven or be in the next world, or they go to Hades and the underworld and they're not in the next world. So what will this next 25,000-year cycle bring, beginning with the age of Aquarius? So again, fear, in my opinion, is not an option. Hate and revenge is not an option. You have to have love in your heart. That was the commandment that Jesus added 2,000 years ago. You are to love one another. But obviously the people who control our planet don't love anybody. They bring us all this wars and destruction and economic suffering in these apparently developing biological weapons in laboratories, and obviously developing these technological radiation microwave transmission weapons and artificial intelligence to make decisions. They've been testing that like in Jade Helm 15 in 2015. And all kinds of preparations for what's coming. So if you know what's coming and you know you need to keep love in your heart, do not go out there and kill and riot and do all the things that might happen all over the planet. Well, thanks for watching my video. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. But I think the things I'm saying can be verified. You can go get these Phoenix journals for free. Published ones, unpublished ones, the Liberator newspaper, Contact newspapers, or watch many of my other videos. I've been doing this research for 15 years. Thank you for watching. Rick Miracle reporting.